Welcome into another edition of Skers Scoop. Today we're going to be recapping Nebraska's spring game that went down on Saturday afternoon. There's a ton of storylines kind of surrounding the game itself. I do believe that there was 27,000 fans there, which is a whole nother topic of discussion, good or bad. Regardless here, you got a live look at, the new roster here. So there was 16 transfer portal additions and another 12 high school recruits that were added over the offseason, and a lot of them were out there today or on Saturday and kind of got their first look at that. So I guess we'll go ahead and just kind of get started with the quarterback situation here. Elliot, it was the first opportunity that fans got to see Anthony Colandrea in live action, and it was super polarizing. Obviously, he played well, I would say, but also you got to see those mistakes in person as well. So I think fans are going to kind of look at that and not really know how to feel at first. But I think you got a lot of what people were expecting out of the transfer portal with him. So I guess if you just want to go ahead and get started on that, let me know your thoughts.
Yeah. So, Colandrea, the few times we did get to see him scramble off, he looked really explosive, which was, obviously something we haven't had in a while. So it was really awesome to see. I'm really excited to see what it is, in a real game when they can actually tackle and it's not just studding. So that was really awesome to see. Obviously, that interception wasn't great. I played receiver, I do at the collegiate level. Watching the replay, seeing it in real time, Quasi Gilmer, I think, was the intended target. He tipped it with one of his hands, and I feel like he definitely could have got the other one over top and got two hands on the football. But also another thing, it's Colandrea it kind of wasn't double coverage, kind of was trying to squeeze it in there. But, winning players make winning plays. So in a real game, maybe that's a risk that Colandrea's going to take, but you want that receiver to make that play because, you're not going to see the, Ohio State's, Indiana's making, it was a bad throw, but he still had a chance to catch it. So you need to catch it if you want to be able to win those big games, because it's going to come down to throws like that on a third and long or third and short. You need to make a grab, and it's going to be contested. You just want to see guys make those plays. But, I think that, overall Colandrea did look, pretty good, other than that interception.
Yeah, I agree. And to your point, just piggybacking off of that, I think even when you look at a situation where Nebraska, was in Columbus and taking on Ohio State a couple years ago, and they had an opportunity when the game was close. They had the opportunity with the ball to go down and win the game, and obviously just didn't make the play to do that. So I think you're right. In those situations, hopefully a Quasi Gilmer would put a little bit more effort into bringing that ball in. But regardless, I do think it was super refreshing to see Colandrea scramble. He's going to take those risks, and Nebraska fans are just going to have to live with it because obviously he's going to make some plays, and then the defense is going to make some plays as well. So just looking at that, I do feel overall that he played well. He did not take a snap in the second half, which really points to, if there was any questions about where he is on the depth chart, obviously now.
Yeah.
He is fully the starting quarterback for Nebraska in 2026. So apart from that, I guess the other thing that really stuck out to me was Jamal Rule's play. Obviously coming in as a freshman, 2026 3-star. He's an early enrollee, and it was super, impressive to see him play that well just early on in his career. Obviously, he should still be in high school. So seeing him play like that, very encouraging for the future of the running back room. But I guess just give me your opinion on how he played.
It was super refreshing to see a breakaway touchdown like that, whether it was against the ones or the twos or if not all starters. It was still just we haven't had a big 75-yard touchdown like that. I think Emmett had a few 50-yarders, but it wasn't against, I don't think we had one against Iowa, almost got it, but got, hawked down at the end. It was just super awesome to see that, especially from a freshman who a lot of, fans were, putting down we got a 3-star running back, and EJ Barthel can't recruit. The narrative that he can't develop. has been, pushed by a lot of fans. And obviously we saw with EJ this past season that, he can develop. And then we're seeing with Makai and Isaiah Mosey that he can. And then with Jamal Rule, he did a good job. Not all the recruiting databases out he was a good player, but obviously he's shown to this part so far that he can play. And so, I'm excited to see where he ends up in the rotation next year. I still think that, Makai and Isaiah Mosey still have a leg up on him, I guess, just because, they've been there. But if Rule keeps playing well, if he keeps doing that during, fall camp and he just kind of bursts onto the scene and takes over RB1, I mean, he's shown that he obviously can do that in the spring game. So, yeah, super promising for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, I think it's one of those situations where Nebraska fans wouldn't necessarily care if he does end up being the starting running back, because that obviously means that he's developed into a really good player. I think physically, even just looking at the picture right now, obviously he's physically ready to play, Big Ten football and at least give them some reps in a rotation of some manner. But yeah, regardless, I would say I think Mosey and Nelson, their workloads were definitely reduced in the game. They don't have a lot. I mean, sure, they do have a lot to prove, but it doesn't need to be in a practice setting. You don't have to show Nebraska fans. You need, in April, you need to show them in November. So
Yep.
I'm not too worried about that. I think there's, I think the super encouraging thing was that I do believe every back was targeted in the passing game as well. So obviously that's going to continue. Emmett Johnson did a super good job at that last year, being a dependable pass catcher out of the backfield and just making plays, when the offense needed him through the pass game. So hopefully that can continue, because obviously our next topic of discussion here is going to be wide receivers. So I think Nebraska fans are going to be somewhat upset, like, you and I were just talking before we hit record here, but at the lack of downfield passing attack that was on display on Saturday. I guess give me your thoughts on how frustrated you are, if you are at that, or I guess if it bothers you that we haven't really seen a true downfield passing attack really since Matt Rule took over.
Yeah, so we were texting during the game, and I was like, it was on the first drive, or even after second or third. I texted and I was like, I think it's only been RPOs and screens or run plays this entire game. And I was, there's nothing wrong with that if you're moving the ball down the field like they were. But, Daniel Holgerson got here, and I was super excited to, see downfield passing and, somebody down the field throw it to him and, a big play, because those are always super excited. And it's not just the exciting part, it's the being able to stretch a defense, because if you don't have a vertical threat, if you're not, threatening a defense deep, those safeties can step up like 5 yards, and play more in the box. And then you're limited in your short passing game and also in the run too. So it's not just about, oh, wow, we're only seeing short pass, it's boring. It also helps schematically, being able to attack a defense and, keeping them on their toes too. And I don't really know whether it's because we haven't really found that vertical threat yet, or if it's just because maybe Daniel Holgerson isn't fully confident in the quarterback's arm. So I've been waiting to see it. Everybody's saying it's just a spring game. We'll see. They don't want to show everything. And then in the non-con games last year, it was they don't want to show everything. I want to see them show it. I want to see it in a game is kind of my thoughts on that. So I'm just a bit disappointed in the regards of I want to see downfield passing.
Yeah, I think, and obviously we were talking about it, before we started recording as well, but I think that kind of attacking the flats obviously works. And if it does work, who cares, right? Because they're moving the ball. But at some point it would be encouraging to see these Ferraris and Lamborghinis that you have in Ja'Cory Barney and Isaiah Hunter and Quasi Gilmer, and even a Quinn Clark, go out and make a play. Like, you have all these wide receivers that were highly recruited out of high school. They've obviously proved that they can make plays. So it's frustrating for Nebraska fans that they haven't necessarily got to put that on full display to this point. The one thing that I would say again is you saw Ja'Cory Barney kind of get featured in the touch passes or jet sweeps, whatever you want to call it, which is encouraging because they're finally, trying to get him the ball in the easiest way possible, which would be in that role, and just telling him to go make a play, right? And specifically on that touchdown that he had, I thought the receivers blocked well, and even I think it was Mekhi Nelson that was in at running back. He laid a good block to get Barney in across the goal line. So if that can keep up, that's super encouraging that they're blocking well. But there's definitely more to be desired on that front from Daniel Holgerson's play calling, or just whatever it is. If it's a mix of his play calling or receivers not being able to get open down the field, whatever it is, I'd obviously like to see that this fall. The next thing I would talk about really for the offense would be the offensive line. It was Nebraska fans' first opportunity to see the three transfers, in live action. And I thought they played well for the most part. They're going against a Nebraska defense that no one really knows how good they're going to be next fall. So you kind of have to take things with a grain of salt. But the starting group only gave up 1 sack, which I thought was something that was, encouraging, obviously, coming in comparison to, a Michigan game or a Minnesota, or, name the game, how many sacks that they gave up last year. Everyone knows that they've struggled pretty poorly or pretty badly. So what do you think of that rotation? And I guess, would you say that after seeing the spring game that, Babalade, Black, and Mubanga are kind of locks to be in that starting unit this fall?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say that they're locks, just because, saying that they're locks is just saying that they're playing that well too. But also, the thing is, you want to see that active competition. You want to see guys pushing them to try to get into those starting spots, because iron sharpens iron, is just the oldest saying in the book. If you have guys that are pushing the starters, the starters are gonna continue to push and get better. You don't want them to get comfortable in that spot. You want them to continue to get better. So, was really promising with what we saw, and we'll get into it with defensive too. But it's you don't want to see, you saw the movement from the offensive line, but you were kind of like, well, is it because the defensive line is just going to be that bad again, or is the offensive line just going to be that good? You also hope that with that defensive line going against that offensive line, that they continue to build off each other. Iron sharpens iron, and continue to get better too. So,
yeah, and I guess that'll go ahead and take us into our defensive storylines here. But I don't know. It's the biggest question probably surrounding Nebraska football right now is what does the defensive line look like? Because there was absolutely more to be desired. Out of the transfer portal and what they brought in. I think a guy like Dylan Berryman that they added late in the 2026 class can absolutely have a say in the rotation, on the interior. But, for guys like Williams Winery, Anthony Jones did not play in the game, which was a little bit of a bummer just because I wanted to see what he looked like in a Nebraska uniform. But, interior-wise, a guy like Jahsear Whittington, I think he really stood out. He had a sack. He's very undersized. He looks small out there, but I think he plays bigger than what he weighs, which is encouraging. But at the same time, I don't know how many Rudies you want on a team, in the Big Ten that's looking to kind of, get back to where they think the program belongs. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that after you got to see, an Owen Stoudemire, Jahsear Whittington, and then in comparison back with guys like Riley Van Poppel, and even like I do believe a Tyson Terry and Malcolm Simpson were out there as well.
Yeah, so it was encouraging to see all those guys out there, especially Malcolm Simpson and Tyson Terry, since they had injuries and they get to play in the fall. So it was really good to see them out there getting some good quality reps out there during the spring game. You're just going to need some guys to take a few steps up. Like Riley Van Poppel, he showed promise for sure at first. When he first got on campus, he played us through his redshirt year, and he only played 4 games. The times he came in, he looked pretty promising. But that was alongside Ty Robinson and Nash Etmacher, so maybe they weren't as focused on him. But you just need some of those guys to take a step forward. And Jahsear Whittington did look good. Like you had pointed out, but you just want some guys to continue to step up, because that's what you're going to need in Big Ten play. We saw it last year with how poor the defensive line did play. You just need those guys to step up, because it's the Big Ten. They're going to run the football a lot, and that was the reason we lost a few of those games. And we need to get some pass rush too. So, yeah.
Yeah. Moving on to linebackers here, pictured, right now is Vincent Shavers. I think it's a really big opportunity for him in 2026. Standing right next to a Owen Chambliss or Dexter Foster to kind of solidify himself as, a player that can potentially end up drafted, if everything goes right. I think to this point, I do believe he's played in every game since he's been with Nebraska. So he has a nice sample size of what he can do. And just moving forward, I think it's a really big opportunity for him to find success with a 4-man front, just being able to hopefully not be relied upon so much to stop the run. Just with the defensive line kind of closing those gaps for him and making it easier to find the ball carrier in the run game. But Nebraska's starting unit gave up 4.4 yards per carry, which isn't bad, but it's not good either. And again, there was like a lack of disruption, I would say, overall, which is somewhat concerning. And either, maybe Nebraska's offensive line is very good and much improved from where they were a year ago. But equally as important as the offensive line needed to improve, so did the defensive line. So, if one's good, that's awesome, but you really need both to take a step forward. So, I don't know. Hopefully those linebackers where they kind of seem to potentially spend a little bit more money on and have success out of the transfer portal with bringing in are able to help out in the run game there. But the last thing I would say is the defensive backs. Once again, they looked pretty solid in my opinion. They didn't really give up anything in the deep passing game by any means. And I thought what really stuck out to me was they were opportunistic when the ball was in the air on that Anthony Colandrea pick. There was only one turnover during the game. Nebraska didn't fumble either, which I guess, good thing for the offense on that. But I thought they looked solid. Again, maybe you're not going to see a whole lot in a spring game, but I guess what were your thoughts seeing, for example, a Danny Odom in action for the first time, Wayne McDougal, those guys?
Yeah, so I think what was really interesting to me was what I noticed on the first drive was Jeremiah Charles was out there with the starting group, opposite side of Andrew Marshall, which was, really promising just because, I think he's a fourth-year guy at this point, which is crazy because I think that was Rule's first recruiting class.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And yeah, so it's really nice to see him out there, and it kind of shows, Addison Williams, how he's developed. Because I think Jeremiah Charles played in the UCLA game, not this past season, but the year before that, and it didn't look very good. So, seeing him out there playing well, was promising. Go off the Danny Odom. He wasn't in as much. It's kind of hard just kind of seeing everybody, keeping track of how many guys were in.
Yeah.
But, I think he can be a player. We'll see how much they rotate at the secondary this year. I think Andrew Marshall is one of those guys that's going to be on the field all the time. But I don't know if they're going to have that guy opposite. Andrew Marshall will be more of a rotational guy. Just kind of see like matchup wise. I think Odom already at this point is bigger than Jeremiah Charles, just frame wise. I don't know height. I think they're probably on the same size height, but Danny Odom just looks. I think is a little thicker than Jeremiah Charles because Charles has always just been a little bit of a skinnier guy. Not saying he can't hold his own physically, but yeah. And I think the one thing just to go schematically with the defense, I think they were pretty vanilla. They didn't do there weren't a lot of blitzes or anything like that. And I think that was a big part of San Diego State's defense last year was, their blitzes and being able to get to the passer in unique ways. So that'll be definitely fun to see in the season, see if they use that. Especially because, Owen Chambliss had quite a few sacks. I think it was like 4.5 sacks last year, playing that interior linebacker position. So obviously he's, coming off blitzes. Like I said last year too, Vincent Shavers was a great blitzer too. So just kind of seeing, all that flexibility we can have, with Owen Foster too, and then Dawson Merritt. Both those guys were out for the spring game, so we didn't get to see them. But I'm excited to see Dawson Merritt's his progression and development too into the season. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that probably about wraps it up for us, I guess. But on the defensive side, there was nothing to be super concerned about, I would say overall. But, again, there's nothing to be too excited about either. So who knows? You can only tell so much seeing them play against Nebraska's offense, and likewise on the offensive side playing against Nebraska's defense. So we're just going to have to wait to see it on the field. But what sucks for fans is this is kind of the last opportunity they'll get to see Nebraska's team until really September. So it's a long road until fall camp begins, in the middle of August. But there's going to be a ton of recruiting news coming over the summer, which is going to keep us busy. I think, maybe to expect a video coming at some point down the line, kind of recapping Nebraska's visitor list from the spring game. It was a huge opportunity. And, there's a lot of official visit dates being scheduled already for the 2027 class over the summer. So expect a ton of news from that coming out in the next couple of months here. But yeah, regardless of that, football is going to keep moving on. And I do believe that we are planning right now on recording a season recap for the Nebraska basketball team as well later this week. So we'll get that out to you guys. But thank you for tuning in to Skers Scoop.